Hello and welcome back to another episode of this Coding Specs Python tutorial series. First of all, for all of you who watch my regular videos, a quick note, I'm in the process of upgrading my setup, so I may not be able to keep up with regular weekly uploads in the next few weeks. However, please bear with me and I will make sure to get back to you with regular uploads as soon as possible. As for today's topic instead, I thought we'd take a break from learning about new coding methods and instead focus on a topic which is often underrated but I feel is of fundamental importance when speaking about coding, and that is neat coding practice. Now, as you can see here, we have two sets of code, one on the left and one on the right side of the screen. Now, which do you think was written according to good coding practice, and which instead do you think was just written for the sake of getting it to work? Yes, I'm sure you all guessed right. The one on the left is the one that was written just for the sake of writing it out and getting it to work, whereas the one on the right-hand side was written in a proper manner and is therefore much easier to understand and go through. Now, as you can see, this doesn't necessarily mean that the one on the right is in any way shorter. In fact, the amount of code, if you actually read through it, is identical. Simply, what we've done on the right-hand side is two things. First of all, we've spaced out our code so that whoever reads through it can clearly distinguish each subset of our code and therefore likewise identify each of the actions being performed. On a second note, and here we come to the topic of today, we have written in comments. These are all those parts of text which you can see in grey and are preceded by a hashtag. Now, what the hashtag does is it prevents that piece of line as being read as actual code, which means we read it as a piece of text, but the code will pretend as if it isn't there. We can of course have a comment taking up an entire line, as in line 1, line 4, line 7, etc., which we'll now see in a minute. Or we can have comments, as in line 27, that start from a certain point of the line onwards. What this means is that on line 27, the code will read through and execute root.configure background equals etc. until it comes to the hashtag. Once it gets to the hashtag, it will ignore all the rest, which basically means we can write anything from then on. Now, looking through this code, it should indeed be familiar to you, because this is the code from one of our previous tutorials, namely the one on tkinter buttons. I can run the code, I'll just run this one on the left, but trust me, it's the same. And we can see that we've generated the two buttons, one that changes the background to green and one that changes the background to red. So now let's look at the code on the right-hand side and see how the comments actually describe what is happening in the code. First of all, we import our library. So we can say in comment number 1, import all the required libraries. In this case, we would just import tkinter as tk. Then in line 5, we create our root window. So of course, in line 4, before it, we write create a new window. Then in line 4, we are stating that in line 5, we are creating our root window. Then of course, in line 7, we say that we define the width and height of the window, as you can see in line 8 and 9. Then in lines 12 through 16, we create all the geometry necessary to set the width and height of the window on the screen. So in line 11, we can say that we set the window to be in the center of our screen. Finally, we go through and prevent our window from being resizable and set the icon of our window to be the logo of the Coding Specs channel. Of course, we then have our two functions, green and red, which are the two functions which will change the background of our window to be respectively green or red. Here I once again remind you that a comment can either be on a single line on its own, as in line 25, or indeed from a certain point onwards of an actual line of code, as in line 27. Finally, at the bottom, we create the green and red button widgets, pack them into the tkinter window, and finally, in our last line, we run the actual tkinter main loop. So with that, this was a short tutorial in which I hope you can appreciate how writing out in actual words within the comments what we are doing in each case can be helpful for other people who come later on to actually read through the code and understand what your intentions were. So please make sure that if you are ever writing a piece of code, not just for yourself but also for others, make sure you add in comments so that whoever reads them can understand what your intentions were and how you went through developing your code. Of course, I should say this is also important for yourselves. I can assure you that many times I have gone back to read a piece of code I wrote several years prior, and trust me, I haven't understood a word of it. Why? Because I hadn't commented it. So don't be like me and make sure to write comments within your code, and while you're at it, why not leave a comment below this video as well? As always, I wish you a pleasant week and I look forward to seeing you next time for a new video. Until then, as always, don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and happy coding!